Hi, second grade scientists. It's Mrs. Shepherd here. Last week we were learning about desert animals and their adaptations, and this week we're going to be learning about polar animals and their adaptations. Now, before I read this cool book, it's just like the desert book, but about polar animals, I wanted to do a little bit of explaining. So, look, I found a whiteboard. I used to play school with this whiteboard with my mom at home when I was a little kid, and my mom found it in the garage, and she said I could use it. So I wanted to explain something really quickly. When we're talking about polar animals, we are actually talking about animals that come from a mixture of two different spots on Earth. Now, I don't have a globe at home, so this is a very, very simple diagram of Earth. Here is Earth. And as you can see, I labeled the North Pole in blue. This is the area that we call the Arctic. Okay, it's areas up by Alaska and Russia. Maybe your adults can help you look even more. And when I'm talking about certain animals like polar bears are only found in the Arctic. Okay? When we go to the South Pole, this is where Antarctica is, the continent of Antarctica, and we call this the Antarctic. And this is where there's quite a few animals found, but mostly one of the animals we think about are penguins. So a lot of kids get confused and they think that polar bears and penguins live in the same spot on Earth, but they don't. They live on completely opposite ends. The North Pole is where polar bears live, and the South Pole is where penguins live in Antarctica, down in this area of Earth. Now, both of the poles, because of the amount of sun that shines on them and the amount of heat that they get, they are both very, very cold areas. So that is where, when we're talking about the polar regions, all of these animals have to adapt to living in the cold. But in this book, it kind of mixes it up, and I wanted to clarify that polar bears are in the North Pole by the Arctic, and in the South Pole, the Antarctic, is where you'll find penguins, okay? So I'm going to get ready to read this to you. Here we go. All right, scientists, so here's our book, Polar Animal Adaptations. And on the front, it has penguins, which immediately I think South Pole, the Antarctic. The table of contents, life at the poles, what to wear, polar body parts, and polar animal behavior. Life at the poles. The North and South Poles are like giant freezers most of the year. Brr. Polar animals have special ways to stay warm and find food in their snowy homes. We call these ways adaptations. What to wear? Some polar animals wear fur coats to keep warm. A musk ox wears two. The bottom coat is soft and warm, and the top coat is shaggy and long. The Arctic fox's coat is the warmest of any mammal. When the fox gets chilly, it sits on its furry tail like a cushion, and it tucks in its nose to stay warm. Now, you might also notice that this Arctic fox is white during the winter, and it's white so that it can camouflage into the ice and snow. Did you know that polar bears have hollow hair? They have tube-shaped fur that traps heat in the middle. So when I think about this, I think of, okay, a straw. A straw has a hole in the middle that goes all the way through, and each piece of hair on a polar bear has a little tiny hole like a straw that goes all the way through it to help hold more heat in each blade of hair. That's a really cool fact. All the heat soaks into the bear's black skin. Why black? The dark color is the best at holding in heat. So this is a really cool page. Polar bears, they look all white because of their white hair and their fur, but their skin underneath all of this is black. It's because black will help hold the heat in even more. So I guess if you had a polar bear and you shaved off all of their hair, you would see all black skin. I don't want to try that. Snowy owls change colors by the season. Their white winter feathers match the snow. Their brown summer feathers match plants and rocks on the tundra. One of the owl's prey, the lemming, turns colors too. It changes from brown to white, just like the owl. An adult owl can eat up to 5 lemmings each day if it can find them. So again, animals in the tundra and in the polar climates, especially the ones that live in the North Pole by the polar bears, they often have different colors of fur and feathers during the winter and the summer. So both the snowy owl and the lemmings, they live in the North Pole by the polar bears, and it shows that they change their color depending on the season. Penguin chicks have fuzzy down feathers and to stay extra warm on the land. As the chicks become adults, they grow waterproof feathers to hunt in the icy ocean. So here's a baby chick with all this extra furry feathers, and then there's some adult penguins. And again, they're in the South Pole. Another bird, the ptarmigan, grows its own fuzzy slippers. Its feathery feet to keep warm when walking on the cold tundra floor. So look, it has bird feet, but they're covered in the feathers. It's so funny to stay warm. How else do polar animals stay warm? Blubber. Ringed seals have a layer of fat called blubber under their skin. Blubber keeps the seals warm and helps them to float. A bow-headed whale's blubber is about 18 inches thick. Bow-headed whales live in cold water all year long. So that means that they have all their organs and all their body parts inside, but then right under their skin, they might have 18 inches of fat and blubber that just helps them to stay insulated and warm. Polar body parts. Arctic hares don't need earmuffs to keep their ears warm. Their ears are short and furry. Their ears are short and furry. Longer ears would get too cold and suffer frostbite. So it's even hard to see the Arctic hares in this picture. I'll put it closer. Notice these hares, they're a type of rabbit. They're Arctic hares. They have lots of white fur to stay warm, but their ears are also shorter and really fuzzy. If they were too long and skinny, their bunny ears, for living in the Arctic, they would get frostbite and get too cold. So their ears are a bit shorter and they're really, really fuzzy. Although their ears are short, Arctic hares are bigger than other hares. Their large bodies hold in more heat. So even though they are rabbits, they're still a bit larger than most hares and rabbits so that they can hold more heat in their body. Many polar animals have big feet to help them walk on the snow without sinking. A wolverine's big paws act like snowshoes, so his paws are huge in comparison to the rest of his body so that he doesn't sink straight into the snow when he's walking. A reindeer's wide hooves are also good for walking on the snow. More than that, they help the reindeer dig under the snow for food. So again, these animals are living in the North Pole by the polar bears in the Arctic tundra. Walruses. Walrus tusks look like giant teeth, but they aren't made for chewing. Walruses use their tusks to climb out of the water, to chomp holes in the ice, and to fight. Isn't that interesting? You think they are just extra teeth, but they're not. They help them pull their bodies out of the water, and they help them to fight. People put antifreeze in their cars. It keeps the water inside from freezing if you live in very cold places and drive your car. Atlantic cod make their own antifreeze in their body. It keeps them from turning into frozen fish sticks in the icy ocean. So they create this own anti-freezing liquid within their body so that they don't freeze into fish sticks. I always think that's so funny. Now listen to this. This is a wood frog. The wood frog has special blood too. As the frog freezes, its heart and breathing stop. In the spring, when it starts to warm again, it thaws out again good as new. So this Arctic frog that lives in the North Pole in the Arctic tundra, it is able to slow down its heart, slow down its breathing so that it can kind of be buried in the snow and stay alive. And then when the snow starts to melt and it gets warmer, it's able to come out and live just as good as new. Now, I don't understand all this. I think I want to do a little extra research. Maybe you do too, on the wood frog. So interesting. Polar animal behavior. The Arctic ground squirrel snoozes through the coldest part of the year. It hibernates for up to 8 months. It is one of the few polar animals that hibernates. Many polar animals migrate to warmer places in the winter. The Arctic tern flies from the Arctic to the Antarctic each year. Then it flies back. It can fly more than 1,000,000 miles in its lifetime. So if it flies from the Arctic to the Antarctic, it means, that the Arctic tern can fly from the North Pole to the South Pole and back every year. That's the entire length of the Earth. That's incredible. And again, when we're looking, these are their behaviors. So when we're thinking about adaptations, it's how do animals act and behave, and what are their actions to help them stay alive. So hibernation, migration, those are behaviors. From colored feathers to wide hooves, polar animals are experts at living in the cold. Adaptations help polar animals survive in the icy Arctic and Antarctic areas. And this is a polar bear up at the Arctic. Definitely good camouflage. Okay. So scientists, this week you are going to be learning more about Arctic animals and their adaptations. I have some readings for you. I have a couple little videos for you to watch. And I just want you to really delve deep into thinking and asking yourself, how does that animal survive in the Arctic? What body parts do they have? What adaptations do they have for their behaviors to help them survive in those conditions? I hope you have a great week, and please email me if you want to have a conversation, or please email me if you have any questions or want to show me any of your work. Bye, second graders. See you later.